Hello and welcome back to Seaside Garage and Happy New Year! This is the first video of 2024 and it's going to be a small test drive in the XM to make sure that the ABS system is now working, that the do-it-yourself sensor I made in the previous video is actually working. And I also would like to do a test of the engine on my Sun engine tester, just for fun, because I think I have figured it out now. So that could be fun to do. So let's start it up and do a little test drive. I got testing number plates on at the moment just to test the brakes are working and what else shows up, because it's going to be nice to just get a feeling if I'm there yet. This car's nowhere near perfect, but I think it's very close to actually being MOT ready, which is not the same necessarily. What I mean by that is everything is up to the safety standards, but there is still a lot of worn items on this car. A lot of worn items. But let's try to fire it up and see. Firstly, ABS light goes out, that's good. The computer is telling me that I got a defective side lamp. Nothing else. Before it had the ABS malfunctioning. So no surprise about the light. I think I know why that is. But let's try to drive it. Now comes the exciting bit of getting over 40 kilometers per hour. Still no ABS light shining. That's good. That means that the rolling test of the ECU has not found any issues. And I think that means that my do-it-yourself sensor is working, which is really nice because that saved me a lot of money. Well, it's not my car, but it saved the owner of this car a lot of money. So that's nice. Other than that, it's a bit surprising to drive a car. I have driven it from my storage, but not on the actual road. But it feels like a car, even though it hasn't been driving for real in 20 years. I got a bit of a funny smell, but that's not uncommon on a car that has not been driven for a long time. The suspension seems to be working all rightish. I am not going to drive fast over bumps in this because these are known to let go at the front. It's not called a shock tower, but where the spheres are sitting, they can come apart and shoot through the bonnet. And this car could definitely be a victim for that, because I don't know when it's changed. It could be the original ones. The owner of the car don't want to change them before it's past the MOT. And that could be a gamble, of course, because if it breaks before, then it's a problem. Just gonna do a tiny brake test, nothing too major, again because of those shock towers. Yeah, the brakes are working just fine. The brakes on Citroens like these are really effective because they are hydraulic. All cars got hydraulic brakes, by the way, but this is just working in a different way. It's you're opening a valve of high pressure hydraulic fluid instead of actually making that pressure yourself using your foot and a brake booster. This one just got a lot of power at very little effort from your feet. Oh, the blinker is working also. Of course I checked that beforehand. Let's try to give it a little bit of throttle, nothing too fancy because it's not completely warm yet, but just up to 3,000 maybe. It seems to be lacking quite a lot of torque down low. I don't know if that's normal, but it wasn't as quick as I was expecting. Now got an error code for the automatic suspension, I think. It's just telling me that it's automatic suspension. Maybe that's all right. It's gone now. Maybe if I put it in sport, does something happen? Yeah, sport suspension. Oh, so it's maybe just waking up the ECU for the suspension now. Sport suspension feels a bit harder. Let's go to automatic suspension again, that's better. Remember, the suspension could be completely wrong feeling-wise because the spheres are very old. But I'm not getting any error codes, so that is really nice. That's a big thing. This got hydroactive suspension, unlike my CX, so it's different in that regard. Other than that, it's very much the same feeling with the steering and so on. More firm ride though, that's for sure. Maybe this XM is actually ready for the road. When the last of the stuff is fixed, there's still some rust that I'm not gonna fix, and the windscreen got a big crack in it. That's not good enough for the MOT either, so it needs to be changed. That's not a job for me either. Oh, something happens when you go to around 2,500 RPMs. There's more power there, a lot more power. I'm just a bit surprised about how little power there is below it, but maybe that's normal. It's definitely pulling rather fine from here on. Maybe not 200 horsepower fine, but at least I'm not getting any error codes. Just gonna swing it around right here. All the gear seems to work just fine. That's a good thing. That would be a big shame to find out now if they were broken. It's the same steering as the CX. Not a lot of wheel revolutions is needed. 2 of them actually from lock to lock. 2 of them, or 4 from lock to lock. Okay, there is power around 4,000 revolutions per minute, but I'm, as mentioned, not gonna go crazy just yet because of the suspension components being vulnerable for failure at the moment. So I don't want to put too much stress on it. There's a Hummer. It's a bit big for these roads, to be honest. Got something that sounds like a bearing, but I think it's the brakes bedding in a little bit. It's a nice car to drive. I'm a bit more nervous than normally because it's not my car. But everything seems decent at least. Oh, here comes a Land Rover. A lot of nice cars today. The 2nd of January. Let's go to the garage. Nothing is on fire, and that's a good thing. And the brakes are working, the steering are working, the gearbox is working, the engine is working. I would like to stretch the legs of this engine a little bit more to actually feel how good it is. And maybe it's also adapting a little bit after all the work I have done. I don't know. It feels sluggish below 2,000 RPMs. Between 2,000 and 3,500 it feels better. And then at that point I can feel it kicking in. I'm not going more crazy than 4,000. I think it was the maximum I gave it this time, maybe a little bit more, because it is waking up. It's not my car. The suspension, I'm afraid of suspension failure, to be honest, because if I hit a bump at high speed, it could loosen up those tower thingies and pop it through the bonnet. That would mean we would have to change the bonnet and all that. That would be a shame. But all in all, I think that was a pretty decent first drive in 20 years, I think. Of course, I have driven it a little bit, but not at all like this, that I did right now. So that's really interesting and nice. Let's, for fun, hook it up to the sun tester and do a cylinder balance test, because I think I know how to do that now. And that could be interesting to see. Doing a test like that means hooking up all the wires from the sun and then starting the engine up. And then the sun computer will manually shut each cylinder off one at a time and then measuring the, I think it's hydrocarbons or something like that, and revolution per minute drop or increase. And therefore we can see if any of the cylinders is way more powerful than others. I'm not sure how well it was going to work, because I presume that this system, the ECU, would detect the misfire and try to do something about it. Try to maybe shut down the injector or something like that. So maybe the result is not going to be that precise, but it's going to be fun to do the test at least. It's just for fun. So to do this cylinder balance test, we need to hook up almost all the wires, not actually all of them. But we need to hook up, not this one, One thing that is very nice about the OBD2 era of cars is you don't need all these wires because it's a bit of a mess. But it's so cool to be able to do this kind of stuff now that I have this machine. I am still learning how to use it because a lot of it is very complicated stuff, but so far I think I can figure out the basic of it. This one goes on cylinder number 1. This one goes to the lead coming from the coil to the distributor cap, like that. This one goes around the battery negative terminal with the arrow pointing away from the battery. It's the amp measuring device. And then this one goes to the battery, positive and negative. And this goes to the battery, or the positive and negative signal on the distributor. This is what makes it possible for the Sun computer to shut each cylinder down, because if it shorts the coil out, it will not make the spark. So it knows when that cylinder is coming, and then it will just short it out. Clever stuff. The last thing is the exhaust analyzer. I'm going to put that in the exhaust and put my extractor on it also. I have actually got a O2 sensor or oxygen sensor for this one that seems to fit. I just don't know if it's measuring the correct stuff because it's not calibrated, it's old. I don't know, I will have to see if I can figure that out, but I at least can see if stuff is happening. And yeah, that's good enough for me, at least for now. And then my exhaust extraction system. Then I'm just going to turn the computer a little bit so it will be easier to see and read it, like so. Get this out of the way. Now it asks me to spin the engine, and it won't fire because it's currently not allowing it to fire. So the first time it just wants me to spin it, and then the second time I spin it, it will fire up. And then the second time I try, it fires up, just like that. Great. The engine is currently hot because this is just after the test drive. So I think we're ready to do the test actually. This is in Danish, so you won't be able to understand much of it. But what I'm going to do is I'm gonna go ahead to the menu, and then I'm gonna choose the test for cylinder balance test. And I'm not gonna start the test before we see measurements over here, because that is the exhaust pump, and that needs to be, yeah, it needs some time to adjust. But it's showing the engine revolutions up here. And here it's showing CO2, hydrocarbons, CO, hydrocarbons, CO2 and oxygen, and a calculated lambda. Oil temperature we'll have to ignore because that is not connected, it's not working. But when we get a reading out here, we can start the test for the cylinder balance test. According to my little sheet right here, it's supposed to go at around 750 RPMs at idle, so it's a bit high according to this one. Not a lot though. There we go, the measurements are in. It's measuring the different kinds of stuff in the exhaust right now. The percent of CO is 0.4. That is, I'm pretty sure that is, yeah, that is exactly what it's supposed to be at idle according to this one. It's 0.5 after the catalytic converter. So, but we don't know if it's true, but I could presume that it actually is. Currently it's telling me that the lambda count is rather high, I think. Not sure though. But anyway, now we can start the test. And to start the test, I'm going to use the remote, which is not very remote because there's a wire in it. And then we're going to start the test by pressing the start button right there. There we go. Now it's started. I'm going to go to page 2. Here we got all 6 cylinders, and then one by one it will short each of them, and then show how many, how that affects the RPMs and the ppm of hydrocarbons. I'm pretty sure it is. So let's see. And also if we can hear that it starts. The idle is where it's supposed to be now. There we go. It is shorting the first one now. It's telling me. Cylinder is being shorted. It's cylinder number 6. You can see the RPMs are dropping by 6. The ppm of hydrocarbons is going up by 1200. And I can hear that the engine is missing one. So that's the first measurement. And it's going to take the next one, number 3. That's more audible, to be honest. You can also maybe see it on the engine that it's rocking a little bit more. Hydrocarbons didn't change as much as the first one, and this is where I maybe have a feeling that the ECU is trying to compensate for all the stuff that's going on. This is the last cylinder, number 1. There we go, the test is done. Let me just show you something that I think is really cool. It's very simple, but still it feels like a bit of a sorcery thing. It shuts the engine off on this one. So there we go, this is the cylinder balance test. I think it would be wise to do it a couple of times to see if it's consistent. And as I mentioned, I don't know how much we can count on this because I don't know how quickly the ECU will detect the misfire and try to remedy or turn the fuel amount down or something like that. So I don't know how precise this is going to be. But as you can see, all cylinders dropped a little bit in revs, except number 1, that was 0. It is all very much within, it's not far from each other, I think. Number 3 seems to be the most powerful one because it dropped 12 RPMs per minute on that one. This out here is maybe more interesting because we got cylinder number 6 and 5 that was pretty high in the ppm. And that's hydrocarbon, so that's got to be unburned fuel. So that's more on those than the other ones. And I don't know exactly what that is going to tell me because I don't know if the ECU is compensating and therefore making those weird numbers. Firstly, I was looking at these two because they are high, and that is number 6 and number 5, which is the rear bank. So if number 4 was also high as that, I would maybe presume that the O2 sensor was not working in the same way as on the other bank, but I'm not even sure it got 2 of them. So I'm unsure about that. One thing that I would like to add to this test is that if the ECU is not altering, or not, maybe it can't respond to this quickly enough for it to notice it, I don't know. But if it doesn't alter anything, then this test could tell me that cylinder number 6 and number 5 is actually getting more fuel for some reason than the rest of them. Because it's measuring the amount of unburned fuel in the exhaust when the cylinder is shut off, and it's pretty much the same on all of them, pretty much except those 2. So that could tell me that it's getting more fuel to that cylinders, maybe because of leaking injectors. It's possible. I'm still learning about this machine and what I can use it for, and as mentioned, I don't know if the reason for this is just that the ECU is trying all over the place to alter the injection and the timing and all kind of stuff because of the misfires. I don't know about that, but it's interesting nonetheless. Anyway, a pretty good start of the year. My son computer system, modular computer system, seems to work. My fix on the XM with the cheap Golf 4 or 3, I think it was, sensor that I spliced into the system instead of buying that one for 850 euros works. That's also nice. The XM itself is working, it's driving. I just drove this car on the road today and it didn't seem completely horrible. I think, except for some rust issues and the front windscreen, that this car is pretty much MOT ready. Pretty much, I think. So I think my work on this car is pretty much coming to an end because this belongs to Bilklubben podcast, the Danish, I'd say the biggest Danish car podcast there is. And I know that they have another one coming for me that is, luckily for me, not as complicated as this one, but just as weird and controversial, I'd say. We'll see about that in the future. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you in the next one.